Welcome to the Sommelier Series, another week with great sommeliers, another week in a great location, the Manor House behind me at Nederburg. Our partners on the Sommelier Series. Great architecture on a beautiful day. It's a gorgeous part of the world and I always love coming out here. It's just so relaxed. You can sit on that balcony for hours and hours, just look out across the Nederburg vineyards and enjoy what is an enchanting little corner of Paarl. And that's not dissimilar to where we are headed today. The 12 Apostles has got one of the most sought after locations in the Cape. Looking out on their deck across the water makes for a beautiful day, and all the more so if you've got a glass of wine in hand. And it'll probably be a pretty good glass of wine because the sommelier, Gregory Mutambe, at the 12 Apostles is a man who's not just a great sommelier, he's a wine judge, he's a wine critic, and he loves absolutely everything about the wine industry. So he's the perfect person to chat to on the Sommelier Series. So as much as I love this gorgeous view here at Nederburg, let's go and find another one at the 12 Apostles. Welcome to another week of the Sommeliers with Nederburg, and the chance to meet another fantastic South African sommelier, and a chance to meet another Zimbabwean. We've already had one this season in the form of Tanashi at the Test Kitchen. The Zimbabweans are invading South Africa, and it's a wonderful thing because they found a great niche in both terrific kitchens and in the wine industry. And the gentleman we chat to today is Gregory Mutambe. Gregory, lovely to see you.
Yeah, good to be here. Feels right. Well, we're very lucky that we saw the opportunity. Myself starting my career in Zimbabwe, believe it or not, out of all places. It started in a little winery called Mukuyu. It's in Marondera, just east of Harare. That's where it all started. So I wanted to do wine, and I didn't know exactly what, as long as it was wine. So I moved down to South Africa, obviously, held up in Johannesburg because I couldn't easily come to Cape Town, so I had to take that detour a bit. So I did my little wine programs there, my wine courses. At that time, it was Cape Town Academy. So when I was confident enough and when I had much needed skills, I took a big step of my life, of my career, and I moved down to the Cape. And the rest is history.
Take me back to Zimbabwe. We have a shared space. I grew up in Zimbabwe. You're Zimbabwean as well. Mukuyu is the benchmark wine in Zimbabwe. I remember my parents drinking a lot as I grew up. You'd always wanted to make wine. Mukuyu was the natural place to go. What was it that drove that passion? What said, Gregory, I want to work in wine?
Well, to be honest, wine is and was a serendipity to me. I wanted to be an accountant like my father, but sometimes you have these role models, you want to be them, but you realize that it's not for you. What was making sense to me was, you know, being involved with wine. I didn't realize I loved it so much at that stage, but as I got into the tasting, into the actual understanding of winemaking and my involvement in the cellar there, I realized that it was so fascinating. It was a complete discovery. And to tell you, those days, this is 2004 to 2006 when I was at Mukuyu Winery, people didn't know much about wine. And wine culture in Zimbabwe, even today, it's very small. So it was the world of the unknown when I was there. And for me, it's not because I wanted to be doing something different, but I'm different, so it sort of suited me what the wine had to offer. So in the cellar there, I was helping with general cellar routines. You call the transfers, the blendings, you name it. But I developed this art. I developed this passion. I wanted to taste. I wanted to know. I was asking questions. The winemaker at that time, Zimbabwean, trained in Australia, Samo Pizzai, was the winemaker and encouraged me to study further. But unfortunately, there were not wine programs, wine learning programs in Zimbabwe at that stage. So 2006, I decided to leave and start my journey into wine.
Do you remember your first ever glass of wine?
Yeah, I do. I drank a little bit before my drinking age. It was a sweet wine. In Zimbabwe, it used to be called chapel. So they use it for the church activities. It's a sweet fortified wine. That's what I had, and I had a little bit too much. So that's my first encounter with wine. I think I was 17 at that time.
The journey from Makuyu then brought you down to the Cape. You studied, you did Garage East winemaking, you did a lot of work. There's quite an academic side to your wine career.
Yeah, well, because when you're talking on the floor to people, to guests, to producers, marketers, and all that, one has to have an insight of wine. And wine does not only, well, the job of a sommelier doesn't only involve opening and serving wine. You have to have an in-depth understanding of how wine is made, where it's from, soil type, you name it. So to make it easier if someone wants to um, get a wine suggestion from you, because you would have an in-depth knowledge of that wine you want to recommend. And obviously we get a lot of foreign tourists that come to South Africa, to Cape Town specifically, and they will tell you, I have no clue about South African wines, but I love Riojas, for instance. And one is to then put that into context and give them a South African equivalent to a wine of their choice, or the wine that they normally drink. So you cannot arrive at a conclusion if you don't understand what Rioja is all about, for instance. So you have to go in depth. You have to be a little bit academic for you to be able to be a successful sommelier, I believe.
I love your passion for and fascination with wine. Part of it stems from the academic background, but a lot also stems from the experience you've had. Once you'd finished studying, where did the journey begin in terms of working in wine and having an actual job in the wine industry?
Yeah, so my first sommelier job was at a Signature restaurant in Johannesburg, in Morningside. I started there in 2009 until 2010. Then the mother city was calling. It was at that time the World Cup, FIFA World Cup. Everyone was so excited. There was a lot of euphoria. You could actually smell it. It was everywhere. So I worked at Vineyard Hotel in Newlands here in Cape Town from 2010. Just over a year, I then moved to the Top Apostles. At Top Apostles, 2011 until today, my career just flourished. I did a lot of things that I was dreaming of when I was back in Johannesburg, and everything just happened so fast. And looking back now, I can hardly believe that it's been 9 years at the Top Apostles. It's been really fascinating. I started being involved in the wine judging, for instance. So I was obviously becoming a more major player. You know, it wasn't just about serving wine in the restaurant. It was also about offering my services to the wine industry as a whole. One thing that I really enjoyed the most is that even though it's same place, I am everywhere. Just recently, I've been appointed the brand ambassador for Busha Finlayson, so that's really fascinating. So I'm also on the other side. As a sommelier, I get to meet marketing people and sales people, but now I'm also playing that role on some. I would do maybe 2 or 3 days a week, where I go to see some potential clients. And what's interesting is that I'm there selling wines, and then later I come to work, and then maybe when I'm not even in the trade, someone comes and sell wine to me. So it's always fascinating, and I think my career is such interesting one, because you get to play for both teams, really, and it's fascinating.
And your focus on the wine business is not merely here because, as you say, you've got a lot of interest. And the one for me that is so exciting in terms of South Africa is the Black Cellar Club. Explain what that is and what your involvement was when it started.
Okay, so Black Cellar Club, I was the founding chairperson. The idea was to make life easier for the next generation that want to be sommeliers, and we thought of leaving a legacy. We thought of leaving, the art, the culture behind. we wanted to pass it on to the next generation, and we're seeing the results already. So the Black Cellar Club attracted people that were working in the hospitality industry, some waiters, you name it, and some of them are actually sommeliers on the floor. But it actually went beyond that. It went to people that are nothing to do with the hospitality industry, and also the people that work in tasting rooms, for instance, in the winery or in the wine industry itself. Some people were doing it just as a job, like when I started at Mukuyu Winery, it was just a job. But I thought, if someone speaks sense to you, you can actually make an informed decision. So that is, in essence, why we started Black, just to empower our fellow African brothers and sisters.
I've eaten and drunk many times at the 12 Apostles. It has always been an exceptional experience, but today is going to be particularly so because Gregory has chosen a dish and a wine. So now, for the real treat of the trip to the 12 Apostles, some food and wine with one of South Africa's top sommeliers. And as if by magic, our food and wine has appeared. The food looks terrific, but before you tell me about that bottle of wine, you mentioned Beauchard Finlayson a little earlier. It's a flagship estate from the Hamiltonada Valley. The Pinot Noir gets plenty of attention, but they are making some very good Chardonnay in that valley as well.
That's correct, and I thought that's what motivated my choice of wine, because all has been said about Pinot Noir and Beauchard Finlayson. Once you mention Beauchard Finlayson, one thinks of Peter Finlayson, and as we all know, he's almost like the godfather of Pinot Noir. But I think that is great. His reputation with Pinot Noir, in a way, overshadows the other work that he's doing, and Chardonnay, for instance, is a bit left alone, and people just talk about Pinot, and I think it's high time we also need to talk about some of this greatest work that he's doing. The winemaker now is Chris Albrecht. He is a young, passionate winemaker, and the 2017 Missionville is really fantastic. For me, the 2017, as you know, was a fantastic vintage. I mean, not only was it for red wines, but I think for white wines as well. And what's fascinating is that usually you would find on a wine list like a 2019 or 2018 maybe for white wines, but I believe wines like a Chardonnay, especially from a cool climate, you can actually keep them for much longer. So we're just gonna taste this, and you'll see what I mean by that. And the wine, last time I tasted it, I think it's still a baby. So
I love the aging potential of our Chenin's and Chardonnays in South Africa, and it's almost something we need to really push more, because people are drinking some of our white wines far too soon.
Yeah, and one other thing that I actually forgot to mention is that some of the things I dislike about patrons that come to restaurants is that some would actually demand a 2020 Sauvignon Blanc in April. I know there's producers that push wines a little bit earlier, but I mean, who says we can drink the wines in the year they were produced? I think it's a bit unfair.
Cheers.
So yeah, cheers. So the 17, as you can see from the color, it's got a really lovely bright golden color, and what a nose. This is just amazing. There's this beautiful nuttiness, a bit of peach and kumquats, and some honey whiffs as well on the nose.
Oh, it's
got an amazing palate weight. That vanilla, that peach, you can definitely pick it up on the palate, and being a typical cool climate wine, you actually get that fresh acidity. It's nice and fresh on the palate.
All right, so paired with the Mission Vale Chardonnay from Beauchard Finlayson, it is a signature fried squid on a barley risotto. Bit of mushroom in there. Looks like some radicchio.
So this is one of my favorite dishes at the moment.
That crunch. It's such a key part of food that not all the chefs get right, is that texture. And it's beautiful. Complements the flavours, complements the wine, complements the excellent company. I'm winning all round today.
I was going to ask if we're still friends, but you just confirmed it. I think the mushrooms have this lovely earthiness, and these oak characters of the wine actually matches that. So I fell in love with squid when I was in Venice last year. I had all sorts of seafood dishes there, and when I came here I tasted this dish, and I was blown away. But it just goes to show that our cuisines here are actually on a very much in line with international trends. I was blown away, really.
On the back of what is a splendid pairing, and I commend you on it. No surprises, but commendations nonetheless. I'll ask you to leave us with a final thought, Gregory. You've done so much in a fairly short space of time. You've had a big contribution on the local wine industry. Going forward, what would you like to see in the next 5-10 years happens to changes the South African wine industry, takes a space that we're both passionate about and makes it even better?
Well, what I would want to see firstly is with the producers is that we will export less of the bulk wines, because that does not give us a good reputation, and people that buy our bulk wines that are later bottled in Europe and America, they always will look at us as a cheap producer of wine, which is very untrue. I mean, we've got exceptional wines like this year, so if they can cut back on that, that would be great. But as consumers, we also need to support them, because if they don't export, then the local market has to absorb that excess wine that would have been exported. This is where Black comes into place, where we need to grow the domestic consumption of wine. And I would want to see Pinotage being celebrated, but we have to obviously get the support from the producers by them making some of the best, finest examples of Pinot Noir. Because Pinotage, sorry, we're celebrating Chenin Blanc in South Africa, which is great, but it's a French varietal. We have Pinotage. We just have to make it right, and I just think if we do that right, this wine industry will be in even greater heights.
You've given us a pretty good roadmap for the wine future for South Africa for the next few years, and with people like you in the industry, I think the future does look very bright indeed. And as with all the sommeliers on the series with Nederburg, an expert passionate about the job, passionate about wine, and doing a great service to wine here in South Africa. Gregory, thank you for some beautiful food, thank you for some lovely wine, thank you for terrific company, and thank you for sharing your story on the Sommeliers with Nederburg.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
To many more glasses.
Cheers. Yeah,
together.
to many more glasses.